welcome to the Red Barrels podcast. It's episode 6.
Hooray!
And for our episode 6 spectacular, we're going to be talking about some great games. But before we start, I would like to say that we're trying to grow, we're trying to get bigger. And so I'm asking right up here at the front of the podcast if you might want to consider reviewing and rating us on iTunes and Spotify and sharing us on social media and telling your friends. I'm just making that plea up here. It's desperate. It makes me look like a really massive loser. I look like a loser, all right? But that's
really
what I'm asking.
Embarrassing.
Exactly. It's all embarrassing. We're all embarrassed.
We're all very
So
embarrassed.
what we're going to do now is we're going to move on to the real meat of our podcast, and that's straight into Who Would Mark's Main? Who Would Mark's Main? It's back. These two,
I've been
they thought
prepared.
it was over. They thought it was over, but it's still going. And today, who does Mark's main? Or who would Mark's main in Mario Kart 8
I
Deluxe?
knew you were going to say Mario Kart. I could feel it in my bones. That's so weird.
Don't know why.
I'm at a disadvantage because I've never played in Mario
And you
Kart.
hate
never played it in
Nintendo.
my
We were
life.
talking about that earlier.
I think he would play Luigi.
You think play Luigi?
Yeah,
He wouldn't
because
play the one wearing red, is what you're saying.
I think he'd play Luigi because free Luigi.
Free Luigi, sure. But I mean, Mario Kart 8 released a long
think he would
time
play
before
Luigi.
before
I think he would play Luigi.
Luigi Mangione did his
Because we
thing.
all know what we all know about Marks.
Allegedly did his
Something
thing.
we all know about Marks is
Yeah.
that he was clairvoyant.
Of course.
Yes.
He-
So
You-
he would have played Luigi.
So what you're saying is that Marx would have used dialectical materialism to predict the emergence of Luigi Mangione,
Yes.
and he would have preemptively played as Luigi in Mario Kart.
Yes.
Okay, that's an interesting theory.
Yes.
Ed, who would he play?
I think he would play Dry Bones.
Dry Bones.
As much as he likes to take the dry bones of capitalism for a spin in his books,
Ooh.
Capital, volumes 1, 2, and 3, available from all good bookshops, bookstores. Yeah, I think he would like to take the bones for a spin. I don't
Okay.
know. I mean, who wouldn't like to take the bones for a spin?
Sure.
Back in Mario Kart DS, I mained Dry Bones. I love that. I love that guy. All the way around Yoshi Falls. That was really my stomping ground. So
Quite an admission.
that's
right?
where I became a man.
Quite an admission that you love to main Dry Bones.
Yeah. But wow.
Yeah. Unfortunately, you're both wrong. The answer is the boy Inkling. That's right. True voice of the working class. And now we can move on to... Sorry?
It's not the red wearing worker Mario.
Yeah, I mean, as I said,
It's Inkling.
the blue character, the boy Inkling
Okay.
from Splatoon. Sophie will know that.
I know Splatoon.
He's the embodiment of the working class.
Why is that?
Look, I don't have time to go through. I mean,
I don't
how
understand
much
any of the names that are being said right now. I don't understand anything.
Go to your capital reading group, and then you'll work it out through there, right? Anyway, we're going to move on to talking about
Which volume does it come up in?
2.
Very nice and confident. Good job.
Yeah. So
Probably
now,
an Engels edition.
Now we are going to move on to talking about games, and the first one up is going to be Apologies.
You haven't introduced us today, so I haven't had the
Do I
opportunity.
have to?
I haven't
Do
had
I
the
have to?
opportunity
Who am I?
to say. Last time you came in your suit, which I really liked, and this time you're really letting the side down. You're wearing these like rags, as if I know you can't see him, listeners, but if you ever watched the Hulk, he looks a bit like the Hulk, like when he's transformed back into a human, and it's like torn up shirt and like big like sweatpants. They're all ripped up, and like I don't really know why he's gone from the suit and tails to this. It's a hot day. Maybe
I would like you two and the listeners to consider what wider ideological point I was making in wearing a suit and tails to one episode and then rags to the next.
Yeah.
I mean, I think
There's something there.
maybe it's kind of gone over your head a bit.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it has.
And in that case, okay, I guess I'm going to have to let you two introduce yourselves. So what's your name?
My name's Ed. Hi.
And
My name's Sophie. Hi.
I'm glad we got that out of the way. Now on to the good stuff.
The other things.
Now on to the good stuff. I'm Alex. Everyone knows that. They're listening for me. I'm the I am the draw of this
He's
podcast.
de la
Everyone knows
resistance.
that. Everyone knows that.
He's the ear candy.
Yeah, very true. But we are going to get on to things and start talking about games. And the first one up is me. Well, that was pre-agreed. That is not my megalomania.
We voted against it.
Well, the
You
game...
lost 2-1. I don't know what's going on
He
there.
gets 3 votes.
Okay. The game I have been playing, 2 games actually.
God's sake.
I've been playing Assassin's Creed Mirage, which was the game that came out a couple of years ago. And that was in preparation for Assassin's Creed Shadows, which is the newest Assassin's Creed and came out literally 2 days ago. So these are very long games. So I have not played a great deal of Assassin's Creed Shadows, just the first 6 hours or something. But so I'm going to be talking about Mirage and the series a bit more generally. So for anyone who's unaware, Assassin's Creed is a series that started in the Xbox 360 generation in around, 2006-ish, I'd imagine. To be honest, I haven't looked up the date, but it's around then. And there's been a bunch of these games. And I kind of find Assassin's Creed kind of really fascinating series because I think it's probably the most complicated mass market media that maybe exists because there's so much going on in these games. I mean, a lot of it is not terribly good. When I say complicated, that's not a sign of sophistication, I should be clear. But there's so many levels of this. So for each game, these mainly kind of instantiate themselves to the player as these expansive adventures set in historical times in reasonably real locations and events and characters that a lot of like real life people turn up in these games. But the premise is that while these real life events were going on, there was a secret war going between the Order of the Assassins and the Order of the Templars, who were only really like in reality in existence in the first game, but have been posited to secretly exist through almost all of time and have influenced events here and there. And you largely play as an assassin taking out Templars to further their goals. But that's only the kind of surface level. That's like most of what you're going to be doing. But the game also posits that there is a thing called genetic memory, where all of your experiences are baked into your DNA, and then those experiences are passed down to the next person's DNA in the list. And so, in theory, you can use these magical machines they have to analyze your DNA and allow you to experience the life of your ancestor from hundreds or even sometimes thousands of years ago. This is pretty ludicrous. The idea that, like, DNA can literally fit on, I think, a single CD. That's how much data there is. And the idea that that's just added with the full life experiences of every person every single time is a bit implausible, but that's the theory. So there is also this entire modern day section where the olden times adventure you've been going on is in fact a simulation of a modern person playing that in order to find out some information or something. So that's the modern level. However, what the Templars and the Assassins are actually trying to do is gain access to what are called Pieces of Eden, which are these kind of quasi-magical artifacts that have various powers like mind control or healing or something. And these artifacts were created by an ancient civilization that existed tens of thousands of years ago. It's basically a kind of ancient aliens theory, except they're not aliens. They actually evolved on Earth and then just died out. That's basically the concept. They're called the Isu. So this is just like an absurdly complicated, like multi-layered kind of premise for a series of games that are, routinely, like the last big game, Assassin's Creed Valhalla I played, I literally finished it, and this is before any of the DLC even, at about 130 hours. It was ridiculously long. Like, and every game has just like generally has a completely new location and time and set of characters and everything. So this is what I mean by how it is unbelievably complicated, these games. And I find that kind of just fascinating that that's somehow been, like that Valhalla I mentioned, that made like $1 billion or $2 billion, I think. It was incredibly successful. And it should be said that the new game that just came out a couple of days ago, basically Ubisoft, who publish it and develop it, are kind of riding their entire company on this one game succeeding, because they've had a number of kind of very costly flops. The Avatar game that came out a year or two ago did not do very well, and the Star Wars game, which is actually, I actually really enjoyed the Star Wars game, but that was also a pretty big flop and cost a great deal of money. So pretty much, if Assassin's Creed Shadows is not a success, Ubisoft is probably getting sold to Tencent or some other big company like that. But the most recent game, I've been well, not the most recent game, but the game I was playing all of was Assassin's Creed Mirage, which is set in Baghdad during the Abbasid Empire. It's in fact a spin-off of a character in Valhalla. It was originally going to be DLC for it, because I know it's kind of interesting to think that this like kind of Arabian Nights timeline was going on at the same time as like Viking conquests. You don't really consider them being connected, but they were at the same time, so that's where the crossover is. And Mirage was kind of purposefully a throwback to, in fact, the very first Assassin's Creed, which was set in the Middle East. It was actually set in Jerusalem with, literal Templars and assassins going around. They probably avoid that these days, I guess. Brighter times where they thought they could get away with a game about that, unfortunately. But Mirage is set in Baghdad, and it has a kind of similar vibe where a lot of these games, including the new one, Shadows, have kind of ballooned into these like huge kind of RPGs. The original games were set in a single city, also maybe a couple of cities. But from Assassin's Creed Origins, that's set in basically the entirety of ancient Egypt, the entire country. Then the following one was Odyssey, which is set in the entirety of ancient Greece. And then the last one, Valhalla, was set in pretty much the entirety of medieval England, which means it is, to my knowledge, the only video game that features Grimsby. Grimsby is in Assassin's Creed Odyssey, Valhalla. That makes it a 10 out of 10 game. You can't ask for anything more than having Grimsby in your game.
Are you from Grimsby?
No, but I just
What's the love for Grimsby?
I've never been to Grimsby. I don't have any particular attachment to Grimsby. Just the idea that I can get on a horse and roll up to a place, and when you arrive there, it says Grimsby on the screen. It's just magical.
Did it seem nice in the game?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like a seaside town.
To be honest, the name Grimsby is so unfamiliar to me that I thought you were talking about a person called Grimsby. I was like, what?
You may be thinking of the Sacha Baron Cohen film, which was also called Grimsby.
I'm not even
who's
thinking
about
about that
a character
either.
called Grimsby.
I'm not even thinking about that. I don't know. It's the first time I've ever heard the word / name Grimsby today.
Oh, well, welcome to the wonderful world containing Grimsby, Sophie.
I'm excited to be here.
It's known as the North. the mystical, fantastical North. Shout out to all our Grimsby listeners.
North.
Yes.
Red Barrels would like to apologise for that horrible abuse of our beautiful northern listeners.
Yeah. Yes, very true. Anyway, Assassin's Creed Mirage. It was a pretty fun. I'd say it's a much smaller game and much more cut down than usual.
And to be clear, it doesn't contain Grimsby.
No Grimsby. That's
okay.
Valhalla.
So what's the point?
Valhalla.
What's the point?
I know. I wanted to see Grimsby located in ancient Iraq. I was hoping for it. I lost it, and I don't mark games out of 10, but for my own personal secret marking, that lost a point. No Grimsby, no point. That's done. That's my decision. But no, it was it was pretty good. I will say that it felt a little redundant. It basically just sets up the situation that you know about with that character. If you finished Assassin's Creed Valhalla, what happened with him was pretty much what you would imagine would have happened based on that. So it's kind of unessential in the wider lore of Assassin's Creed. Not that, while I mentioned how incredibly complicated it is, there has clearly been very little grand plan between these games and what they're trying to achieve, which seems to be even more the case in this new game, Shadows, which is set in feudal Japan during the conquest of Oda Nobunaga, who was the guy who unified Japan. We're checking with our Japan expert here. Is that true?
Yes.
Thank you. And which is kind of a bit weird, because in Valhalla, that was all around the conquest of King Alfred, who's the man who unified England. So I guess they're just going to be doing that from now on, finding the whatever king or warlord unified these places and just doing a game about them. So this game has had a bit of a controversy. And by controversy, I mean the stupidest people alive are upset about it. And what they're upset about is that there are two main characters that you play in this game.
Is one of them a woman?
One of them's a woman, but that's not the issue.
Is one of them black?
That's the issue.
Yeah.
So I think is a first for the Assassin's Creed games. In this game, you play an actual historical figure who's a real person who really existed called Yasuke, who is somewhat famous for like samurai fans because he was a Portuguese slave who was black, and he, through some means, I'm not entirely sure if what is depicted in the game is accurate, but it's probably fairly close. Oba Nobunaga, who I mentioned, he kind of had these Portuguese people basically hand over Yasuke to him, and he became what I believe is called a retainer, which is basically a samurai. There is a lot of this very stupid debate, which you can probably imagine, has been around whether he officially counts as a samurai, but he like had samurai swords, he had samurai armor. Maybe he technically wasn't a samurai. I haven't even gotten to the game where they have officially declared whether he is a samurai or not. It's kind of irrelevant. The thing about Yasuke is that very little is known about him. We know that he existed. We know that he had the position I mentioned, and that's pretty much it. What his interaction following Nobunaga around and like fighting in battles for him and so on is known, but like what happened to him, how he died eventually, what he did after any of that is unknown. So that basically gives them huge leeway to just do whatever they want with him. And that's also been the case. From my understanding, there's been like quite a number of depictions of Yasuke in Japanese media. He's quite popular in Japan, from my understanding. So a lot of the ridiculous anti-woke YouTube channels and streamers and so on have been very upset about him turning up at all, and like acting as if this is some sort of grand insult to the Japanese people, which they obviously definitely care about. But in fact, he's popular and well liked in Japan already. And from my understanding, the main reaction from the Japanese people when this was announced was like, "Oh, cool, it's Yasuke." So yeah, it's very stupid. Unfortunately, in the game so far, he has not appeared much. From my understanding, there's basically a short introduction where he's at the beginning. You play as him, and then it switches to the other main character, who's a woman, who's a ninja, basically. And everything I've played so far, which is about 6 hours, since it only came out the other day, has been her. My understanding is the story moves on a bit, 2 characters meet, and then you can switch between them, and there's plenty of Yasuke later on, but just not at the beginning. So I haven't seen much of him. He seems cool, though. Looking forward to it. Basically, the way the gameplay works is that the 2 characters are very different. The woman, Nae, her name is, I believe. She's like a ninja. She's small and agile and can do all the stealth stuff. But Yasuke is very large, and he's basically a samurai, and he can just like blast his samurai sword through everything and take a lot of beating. So that's like the 2 kind of play styles in the game, which it's got to be said, this game does bear quite a large similarity to Ghost of Tsushima, the former PlayStation 4 game, which is also set in feudal Japan and also has, while you only play as one character, the entire kind of premise of it is that he has to choose and like interchange between being a samurai and being a ninja. So both of these games have this kind of dichotomy of, frontal attack samurai and sneaky stealth guy ninja. So they are quite similar. And it's got to be said, while from what I've seen, Assassin's Creed Shadows is very kind of technically beautiful. There's incredible draw distance, lots of particles on the screen. So you have all these like the wind and the leaves like fly in the wind. It's very beautiful in that. Ghost of Tsushima, even though it's on older hardware, really has a kind of aesthetic edge to it. That's a really beautiful game, and this can't really match that aesthetically, which is a bit disappointing to me. But I will say, this is one thing that has just driven me insane about this game. This is one of the most bizarre choices I've ever seen. And maybe it's just my own weird little foible. So you're just going to have to put up with me ranting about this because it drove me crazy the other day. So, like a pervert, I invert my look in video games. Okay? Yeah, exactly. I'm sorry, everyone. I'm sorry. Please accept my apologies for my deviance. But yeah, I played GoldenEye 64 on the N64 back in the day, and that had it as standard, and that's just how I've played games ever since. And this has not been an issue for quite a long time. I'm just used to it. I start up a game, I go into the options, I invert the camera.
I always wondered who that setting was for. It's for you.
It's me. We're out there. Don't worry. We're like the
They
assassins.
live among us.
We're like the assassins. We're a secret order fighting for justice. Yeah. We're. I mean, I'm not going to say we're better people, but maybe I'm implying that. Anyway, in this game, usually what I do is I go to the
You make me sick.
I go to the options menu, and there'll be invert y-axis or something, and I just tick that box, and I don't think about it again. That option exists on Shadows, but it comes up with a little menu that has multiple choices. I thought that's odd, but I just go with yes, because that's what I do on literally every other game. I start the game up, a bunch of cutscenes, as you might imagine, and then in this game there are like choices you can make in dialogue, and it's a little wheel, and you are supposed to tilt the analog stick to whatever you choose. And I try and do this, and this is on the left stick. I try and do this, and it's just not working. It's selecting the wrong one. What I've discovered, and this comes out when I get into actual gameplay, is that when it said reverse, invert y-axis, it meant it did that for both sticks all the time.
For literally everything.
For everything. So when I walked backwards. I try and walk into forward, I'm walking towards the screen. It was bizarre. So that's what those choices were. So
do you know if there are one of you who needs that?
I have no
are there
idea.
others like
I'll talk
you
about
that
my
need
theories
that?
about that in a sec. But
A different kind of specimen.
because this isn't
Kind of strange.
So
Version.
I try and work out what's going on. I go into the options, and I realize, when I said there were different choices on there, I was like, it says yes, it says no, yes, left stick, right stick. So I'm like, okay, well, I guess I only want it in the right stick because that's the camera, right? So I put it on the right stick, and now I can play the game normally until I get a bit further in the game and I open the map. And in that game, zooming in and out on the map is on the right stick.
Oh no.
And now that is also reversed. So in this game, you're like every other game that I invert on, it realizes it's for the camera, and that's it.
Not for everything else,
Not for everything else. But the way this game is made, all it did is on the system level, it just basically swapped up and down on the right stick for everything. This includes when text boxes come up and you can scroll through them. That also is now reversed. And there is nothing I can do to change this except have it uninverted completely. That's it. Even more crazy, there is a tick box, which is invert for aiming, right? So obviously I ticked that back at the beginning. But because the original inverting option completely inverts the stick entirely, with that tick box marked, that means that it's actually reverted for aiming. So I have to turn it off.
How did they fuck it up so bad?
I have no idea. Like, literally every other of the fucking half a dozen more Assassin's Creed games have had it right. Assassin's Creed Mirage, which I just played, only came out a year or two ago, that has it fine. For some reason, they added it in. Now, my suspicion is that this is about accessibility. There are lots of accessibility options in this game, which are great. It's fantastic they're doing that. And I imagine that, people who with disabilities who play games, they often have kind of these specialized for them controllers that work around their disability, kind of jury-rigged a bit often. And I imagine for them, the ability to just completely invert the sticks entirely on a system level, maybe that has some use to them. So in that regard, I think it's maybe a decent idea. But the fact that they don't have a just invert the camera option is crazy, especially when they do have just invert the aiming option.
Yeah, it seems like maybe this is a worthwhile feature, but also it's been poorly implemented. So the idea is kind of...
It's ridiculous.
Wasted anyway.
And I literally looked online. I was like, I must be missing something. There must be some option. And like, no, this is genuinely it. People on the internet are like, how is this working? So yeah, I just have to get used to pushing in to zoom out on the map and scrolling the text backwards. It's the most bizarre thing.
I think I would just stop playing, honestly.
I do like it. I mean, to be honest, there are a lot of weird problems with the game. The gameplay in general is just many weird decisions. Like I'd say you play as the ninja girl, at the beginning of the game, and I'm trying to do a contract to basically clear out a little camp, kill all the guys in it. And because I'm a ninja and I'm early on, it's better for me to stealth it. But usually there's like one or two like proper samurais in armor, and you can't fully assassinate them, right? You can like knock out a bunch of their health, but you can't take them out. So you are going to have to fight these guys. But a lot of these guys, they will, in a move that's like 1 second long or something, they will call out for reinforcements. They'll just say, hey, need more troops or something. And even if you like stealthily killed everyone else in the camp, it then just spawns like 5 guys off camera that just rush you. And now you have to fight them, all of them, with a samurai sword, which is not even your forte. And it can be extremely frustrating. There's just like all sorts of things. Like a classic part of Assassin's Creed is finding so you want to find these synchronization points, which are these various towers or high points in the world. There's a little challenge to climb up, and when you do, you get like a zoom round it. It's very fancy, and you get a fast travel point. In previous games, it's like activated other points of interest on the map. And so that's just a kind of an easy thing to do. You see,
still leap into a hay barrel.
Yes, you do still leap into a hay barrel.
Yeah.
Everyone loves it.
That's the only thing I enjoyed out of my one Assassin's Creed experience when I was a teenager.
Which one was that? Do you remember?
I don't remember. No, I remember. I think it was that one that had the trailer that went really viral. The one where he's wearing a white coat.
He wears a white coat in all of them.
He wears a white. Oh fuck.
The one with the assassinations.
Yeah, actually,
the one set in a historical time period.
So. Yeah, specifically. So this isn't very interesting, but the one. Do any of you know Tobuscus?
Yes.
No.
Yes, I know what you're talking about.
You know the one
I
I'm
think
talking
maybe
about.
Assassin's Creed 2? It's
Yeah.
one of those ones with that.
Yeah, where he had like so Tobuscus is an old YouTube. He's been cancelled now.
Oh,
He's a really weird guy. But anyway, he did these like musical trailers, and I think that he did one for the Assassin's Creed, which then went viral. Yeah. And I played that one because I really liked Tobuscus at the time.
Oh, I see.
And I watched that video, and I was like, well, this game is fine. But I like the hay barrel.
Yeah, I mean...
Bales. I can't say that. I like the hay bales.
I would say, there is I think I would say it feels like... I want to say it's an acquired taste, but like these are mass market, very popular. So lots of people have acquired.
Definitely not an acquired. It is basically McDonald's of.
Yeah, they are a bit. They are a bit. I am an absolute.
Creed, good sir. Why, yes, I have acquired the taste.
I am an absolute mark for just open world games, and like there's the icon on the map, and I go to do the icon, and I clear out the icon, and now it's clear. I just can eat that up. I can eat it up like a big bowl of soup. Just down it goes.
The only icon I need is you, Alex.
Oh, that's what I'm talking about. That's the loyalty I've come to expect from my co-hosts. No, before I was talking about the sync points though. So that's just an easy thing that you usually do in these games early on. You see the sync point, and you're like, that's a pretty easy thing. I don't need to be high level to do that. I could just do it, and it'll give me an idea of the area. But going through the landscape, almost every sync point is the top of a castle, and the castles are by definition heavily defended, and so you just keep like, oh, you see on the map, oh, I'm gonna go there, and it happens over and over again. And I just get there, and it's like, oh, I can't climb that. Off I go, and it's just like a weird little kind of frustrating issue. I feel like these things all kind of wear themselves away as I play the game, and I'll just get into it and I'll be used to it. But it's also very strangely paced. There are literally multiple tutorials for the same thing. There's like, you have early on, there's like kind of start in media res sort of. You go like right into a big battle, and it tells you how to do the fighting and the parrying and all that. And then some things happen, there's some story stuff, and then you're now the other character, the woman, and now you're training with her father, and she's telling you, he's teaching you how to fight and how to do the parrying. And I'm like, well, we already did that. And then there's a tutorial about how to climb, and they're like, oh, we already did that. It's just a weird thing, but then, so it's very slow. As I say, I'm 6 hours in, and I still haven't got to play as Yasuke properly. But while it's really slow, at some points it just becomes incredibly fast. Like, after the whole kind of setup of basically how the story begins and what the inciting incidents are, you just turn up at this place run by a woman you literally met once in the game. And then she's just like, oh yeah, well, one, you need to assassinate all of these people, she just says. out of nowhere. Oh, like you need to get revenge on these people. So you are the person who's going to have to go and personally kill all these people, says this woman you've met once. And you're like, okay, sure. And then you're like, okay, and now we're also going to build up this entire area as like a town, and you need to recruit people and have scouts and stuff. And you're like, I literally just met you. Why are we doing this? Isn't it barely, like, it feels like the game really wants to get to, it feels like maybe the intro should have been even longer. And that's the last moment they were just like, oh shit, oh, it's taking too long. Oh, we'll just cut all this bit at the end. Maybe they should have cut some of the earlier stuff instead, so that this stuff made a bit more sense. But I mean, I'm going to keep playing it. I'm a sucker for this kind of stuff. Maybe to talk about the politics of these games a bit. I mean, I haven't got anywhere near to long enough in Shadows to really comment on it. But they've often, part of the kind of appeal of Assassin's Creed has been they are like generally underserved historical and locations or time periods. It's kind of they break it occasionally. In this case, feudal Japan. There's quite a lot of games set in feudal Japan, so that isn't very new. Although this has been long hoped for by the fans. But the first game set in the Crusades, and that was the first game I'd ever played set in the Crusades. Renaissance Italy was the next one, then the American Revolution, then pirates. I remember when Black Flag came out, Assassin's Creed 4, which is a pirate game, and everyone was like, why aren't there more pirate games? And then this led Ubisoft to spend like a decade making Skull and Bones, which was another colossal failure, which cost apparently hundreds of millions of dollars to
I've
make.
also played Black Flag, I'm realizing as well, and I did actually enjoy the pirate segments and nothing else.
Pirates are good. Sailing boat's good. Sailing boat's good.
Pirates are great. Love a pirate.
But the politics of these are interesting. They're like, so even from the first game, they had a disclaimer on it that said, like, this game is made by people of multiple faiths and none, and multiple ethnicities and nationalities and none. the true neutral. Yeah.
If I die, tell my wife hello.
Hello. Yeah. And having a game, I mean, I joked about it earlier that, they wouldn't make a game set in Jerusalem now. But I mean, there's never been a great time there in our lifetimes anyway. And it was pretty ballsy of them to do it in the first place. And they've often, they're dealing with historical figures and times and places that, are important to some people. I'm sure there's someone who's going to be upset that they suggested that Leonardo da Vinci was gay, even though he apparently was. Or that's the theory, I believe. Things like that. In
historically unique and interesting places, much like Grimsby.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm hoping for the next time it's just going to be Assassin's Creed Grimsby. That's what we want. We all need it. Make it happen. I mean, it's only a small town. Do modern Grimsby. Or maybe future Grimsby. Let's say futuristic Grimsby. Let's have it. Let's do it. And if you don't do it, Ubisoft, you're cowards. Let's be absolutely clear about that. Anyway, this disclaimer was on all of their games. And at some point later on, they actually added gender identity to that as well. However, it's not really in this one. They have a different disclaimer that is a lot less forthright. And I suspect that they took out their classic one because of the anti-woke backlash and, in general, the state of it, what's going on in America and everywhere else as well. That's like very bad and working against all that kind of stuff. As for the actual content of these games, while there is an admirable attempt to like showcase, people who are underserved or, again, all the groups who were mentioned previously, they are fairly middle of the road. Famously, of course, in Assassin's Creed Syndicate, which is set in Victorian London, you did have Karl Marx as a character in the game who was quite sympathetically shown and you could do missions for. Although I can't really remember much of it, but there have been complaints that basically it kind of sands down his edges and like makes him a lot more cuddly. And he's like, hey, I don't like violence. We should never do violence in the name of class struggle, says Karl Marx in that game, which is an issue. But I mean, the fact that Karl Marx is in it at all was fun for me. But in general, there's an interesting thing that you see in a lot of Ubisoft games. This includes the Watchdog games, especially, actually, which are sort of kind of basically the modern day version of Assassin's Creed they have, which is basically, I think that leftism kind of all the stuff we're interested in, it makes for a very good setting for a video game. You're fighting against the man. You're like bringing down the system. In the games, you can, slowly bring people over to your side. Assassin's Creed, not Assassin's, Watch Dogs Legion, the most recent one, which is also set in London, that had a really interesting mechanic where you could recruit anyone you could see in the game, or every NPC could be recruited to your cause, and you could then play as them. And they had like this quite clever system of kind of generating quests basically around them that you'd have to do to kind of bring them on board. And, it wasn't a billion miles away from, leftist recruiting, It was like a much more heightened and exciting version of that. But they never really go the full way, as you'd probably imagine, for a multi-billion-dollar corporation. For now, they are anyway. In the Assassin's Creed games, the conflict between the Assassins and the Templars is that the Templars are basically in favor of order, and the Assassins are in favor of freedom. And they very rarely get any deeper than those extremely broad concepts. The Templars are often in favor of using those magical artifacts to like mind control people, which is not really much of a real life concern these days. Maybe, yet, who knows what Elon Musk's up to. But the wish for freedom is incredibly vague, and they kind of explore that in some of the games. They say, full freedom would be bad. But I mean, just the idea that there are these entire secret orders fighting a war through history over these incredibly vague concepts is kind of ridiculous. And like frequently they'll just like, whose side each of those groups are on is just kind of random. Like, for instance, the order of the Templars, who in favor of, order, they were behind the French Revolution in that game, whereas kind of trying to stop the French Revolution were the Assassins, which is a weird combo. It's just very muddled. There's often quite you can tell there are people who work on these games who are, earnestly have good politics. I remember there was, in one of the earlier games, there was like quite a hidden, you had to like really do some stuff to reveal that the Citizens United case in America that basically made it so that corporations could donate infinite money to candidates in elections. That was actually a plot of the Templars in the lore of Assassin's Creed. But usually it's been pretty weak. But, that's kind of these games. It feels just like a really big bowl of porridge. You just kind of work through them. There's a lot of nice stuff to look at and see, and, fun characters, but they're never it's like comfort food is what I mean. It's just, it's just nice to go through. And hopefully that once I get over this ridiculous inverting camera stuff in Assassin's Creed Shadows, that'll be waiting for me.
How many of these games have you played?
All of them, except there's a couple of side games. Where there's one called Assassin's Creed Rogue, which was like a lower generation version they put out when Unity came out. I haven't played that. There's one that came out for the PSP, but then has been ported to other stuff that I didn't. It was for the PS Vita. Sorry, I didn't play that. But almost all of them. So I don't know, as close to an expert as most people are going to be, and I couldn't really tell you what the overall plot is about. It's so ridiculously complicated.
I was going to ask you, I guess you haven't really gotten far enough to identify like what the vibe is of the game towards Yasuke being black. Like, I'm wondering if there is any sort of conversation about that.
There is a little bit in the beginning. I mean, it is a bit, I don't know, jarring. I mean, it's understandable, but like the Japanese guys like literally say to the Portuguese, like, who is your black man? And he's just like, but yeah, unfortunately, literally, it's like basically two scenes that he's in at the beginning. There's like literally the scene that introduces him and when he gets in with Nobunaga, and then there's a scene where he is part of an attack on a village by Nobunaga, and that's 100% of what I've seen of him so far. So I can't really comment on it. From what I've heard, people are, decent people are pretty positive on it. I'd be surprised if it wasn't handled pretty reasonably well. I'd be surprised. Certainly, I haven't heard anything to suggest it hasn't been. And things like you'd obviously expect Japanese people of that time to not have seen many black people and so would be surprised about it. But I think their reactions are like reasonable within the context, but that's only from what I've seen.
Who would Mark's main in Assassin's Creed?
Who would
This
Mark's
is how
main
it feels.
Marx would, presumably main one of the Fry twins in Assassin's Creed Syndicate because he personally knows them in that game. So, and helps them and supports them. So we actually have a very clear answer.
We do, yeah.
For that. I think it was the woman he was.
If our listeners wanted to play just one Assassin's Creed game, which would you recommend as the first one that they played?
Probably Odyssey. That's a very fun game. The main character, you can actually choose. They went through a thing of allowing you to choose between two characters who are basically, you could choose at the beginning and you play the whole thing as them, and one was a man and one was a woman, because they really, to be
Don't
generous.
worry, guys. We're not going to make you play as a woman.
They are really desperate to not have a man you can play as in these games. Like multiple times they have, like, Odyssey was meant to be you play as Cassandra the woman, and they were like forced by the marketing guys or something to add in a man you can play as instead.
Men don't want to play as women.
Everyone hates the man. He was boring. Everyone loves the woman, and they've now made it canon that the woman was who was chosen in future games. And they did a similar thing in Valhalla, where it was actually the same character, but you could choose if they were a man or a woman. And again, I believe they made the woman the canon choice again. So they're just absolutely desperate to not do that, which is kind of weird. Yeah, it is cowardly.
It's not very realistic because women weren't invented until 1952.
Yeah, exactly.
Women didn't do anything until
that's what the YouTube channels I've been watching have been telling me. So it must be true.
Black people didn't exist until
they weren't.
BLM.
Yeah. Well, I think we can probably move on to Mr. Potter. What have you got?
Bonjour. Salut.
Comment ça va?
Right. I'm going to be talking about It Takes Two, which I mentioned in the last episode I just finished. So now I've had time to reflect on it and give my thoughts.
Wow.
It Takes Two is a 2021 co-op action-adventure game from Hazelight Studios. In it, you control one of either Cody or May, who are a married couple on the verge of getting divorced.
So wait, you're saying this game, they also couldn't bear to not let you play as a man in it?
Exactly.
This is spread there.
Cowards.
To be fair, their most recent game you play is two women. So
yeah. Many similarities to Assassin's Creed. Your characters are turned into dolls at the start of the game, and you must go on an adventure to restore yourself to your human bodies. And you're guided by a magical book which has come to life, which is called Dr. Hakim, who is also guiding you to restore your relationship.
Wow.
Yeah, it's quite deep like
Happens
that.
all the time.
This game can only be played co-op, whether online or via local split screen, with one of you playing as May and the other one playing as Cody. I played it with my fiancée.
Whoa! This is new information, by the way.
Hot off the press. Well, that's true. I actually played it with my girlfriend, but
yeah, exactly.
But anyway,
so that's a
lie.
That's a stolen valor, right?
Yeah,
stolen valor.
Via local split screen over the course of a few months on my PlayStation 5. So, what do you actually do in the game in terms of gameplay? That's actually quite hard to summarize because the real strength of this game is the variety. Basically, what happens in the game is your characters arrive at a location. For instance, the first one is a shed. They're really, really small, these dolls. So a shed seems like a massive place to be rather than a shed.
You haven't seen how big my shed is.
I haven't seen how big your shed is, and now I want to. Yeah, so ever since we stopped recording in your shed, I've heard it's gotten a lot bigger. They decide they need to go somewhere, like probably in the distance, and then they get given a new mechanic for each level to facilitate them getting to that place. So each level has a mechanic that's only there for that level and then goes away again. So gameplay-wise, it's kind of hard to describe because each level has slightly different gameplay. And what will happen is Cody will be given one mechanic and May will be given a different mechanic that sort of complement each other. And you've got to use both mechanics to make your way through the level. On top of this, these new mechanics are sort of on top of like some light platforming elements, fighting level-specific enemies, and then beating puzzles by combining your powers. So that's sort of the core which persists across the whole game, plus the new mechanics. To give you an example of the kind of thing I'm talking about, in one level, May can make clones of herself, while Cody can make time move forwards and backwards. So the kind of thing that would happen would be you get to a door with 3 sort of switches or like buttons that you'd need to stand on, pressure plates. 2 would be next to the door and 1 would be across a sort of ravine. Cody and May could each stand on a switch, and then Cody would use his time powers to sort of repair a bridge that had previously been there. And then May could send a clone across to stand on the switch on the far side, thus opening a door with all 3 switches. It's that kind of thing. Part of the fun of the game is seeing what other level-specific mechanics there are, so I don't want to go through too many. I'll give you a couple of other examples, though. You've got one where you've both got magnets on your back of opposite charges, and you've got one where you've both got sort of complementary weapons. So, like, one of them can use their weapon to like freeze enemies in place or reveal a weak spot, and the other one has to hit the enemy. Like, it's that kind of stuff that works together. And that variety also follows over into the locations. Like, yeah, I mean, I know Ashed doesn't sound like a very interesting location, but like it is really interesting. And each location does feel very different. And there's a whole bunch of them. Part of the joy of the game is the variety, so I don't want to go into it too much. But just a couple of other examples. There's a level set inside of a cuckoo clock, and there's a level set inside of a snow globe, and those both stood out to me as a lot of fun to explore. My feeling playing the game was that it felt like it was designed for a couple where one of them plays games and they want to introduce their partner into gaming.
Oh, right.
So if that's something close to your situation, it's easy to recommend this game.
Is that close to your situation?
Yes, yeah, that is pretty close to my situation.
Yeah.
My girlfriend,
Your what?
my fiance, I've sort of been introducing her to some games over the last couple of years. But growing up, she did like Mario Kart, stuff like that, but not too much. So yeah, that is pretty close to my situation.
Does she listen to the podcast?
Sometimes, yeah.
Sometimes
I listen to them without her. Sometimes I glue her ear to the phone and she can't get away. And she's got to hear every
that's why I like
single word that we say. And she also loves to be talked about on the podcast.
I bet.
I'm so sorry. Yeah, and it doesn't have to be romantic couples either. Obviously, I think it would work as an introductory point if you're introducing a friend or a sibling or a roommate or whatever. But the reason I say this, a part of it is the variety that it serves. It's like a smorgasbord of different gameplay styles all within one game. So you get to try out a bunch of different game types and maybe get a sense of what a good game would be to introduce your less experienced partner to next. The downside of this is if you're an experienced gamer, if you're a hashtag #GamerTM, much like myself,
Of course.
it's unlikely that this will be your first time with any of these specific mechanics. And while they are developed like reasonably well, you do spend like an hour or two with each one of these mechanics and it's not super like boring and repetitive. Like they do develop it a bit and do some interesting stuff. If you're an experienced hashtag gamer, you've probably used more developed versions of the same mechanics before. For example, with the time manipulation I mentioned earlier, the game Braid springs to mind as a game that has a similar mechanic but explores it a lot more than this game is able to.
Of course, yeah.
That also extends to the difficulty of the game, which is to say it's a pretty easy game. If I were playing this game by myself, I would say the game was way too easy. But I mean, you literally can't play this game by yourself. And as a co-op game, it has quite a difficult balance to strike. And that's part of what makes me feel like it was intended to help gamers get non-gamers into gaming as well. It's maybe a little too easy for someone who already plays games, but it's quite a good difficulty for someone that doesn't. It's also not so like pathetically easy that it's really boring. And it is a difficult tightrope to walk. Like if it was any harder, maybe the experienced gamer would have to sit there for ages watching their less experienced partner get stuck on a level and play it over and over again or whatever. So I do think it's a good level of difficulty for what it's trying to be, but it is very easy. Like, don't go into this game expecting a challenge if you are used to really playing any game, even vaguely adjacent to this one. It also has a very cutesy aesthetic, and it's got a story about recovering a relationship. And so that does also feel like it was probably deliberately written with a romantic couple in mind as like a wholesome activity for them to play together. We did mention that a few episodes ago when we were talking about Hazellight's then upcoming next game, Split Fiction, which has since been released, which doesn't really have that aesthetic. And I probably will play that one, but we're less excited about that because it doesn't quite have that same cute vibe from what I can see.
Yeah, it looks, I mean, it's like a fantastic world, but like the characters look realistic and stuff. It's fairly...
The only complaint I would have about the aesthetic is you spend most of your time with the main characters being dolls, but you do occasionally cut to their daughter, who's just a regular human, and she's so uncanny valley that I have to hide behind the sofa like the Daleks have come on the TV or something. She's horrible. She's a horrible nightmare. But yeah, the story's relationship to the gameplay is something I want to touch on in a sec. But first, the story itself is quite a pleasant experience. You know how it's going to end realistically from what I've told you so far. I won't tell you how it ends just in case. But obviously, it's a story about potentially recovering a relationship.
I assume ends with
divorce. Yes,
divorce, and one of them tries to kill the other.
Died.
Yeah.
Divorce, beheaded, survived.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
But I would say the pacing of that, how that story unfolds, is maybe a little off for me. They spend maybe the first 2/3 of the game with sort of no real progress on their relationship as far as I can see. Like basically nothing happens at all. And then in the last third, suddenly things begin to get a little better for them. The only downside of that as well is, so the characters are May and Cody. May is like quite highly strung. She's like a hardworking person, like very sort of go, quite competitive. Whereas Cody is like very relaxed, potentially to a fault. That's the kind of dynamic. And May, early on, in my experience, I mean, I played as Cody, but could be quite abrasive, I would say. She would often sort of shout at Cody to like hurry up and things like that.
Wow.
Which, is fine, but it's for 2/3 of the game, having one player character shout at the other player character to like, hurry up, Cody, and stuff like that, especially because, as I say, I'm the more experienced gamer in this situation. Normally, I'd be like a long way ahead, and then I'd wait, and then May would catch up, and then May would immediately be like, hurry up, Cody. I'm like, pipe down, May. Come on, I've been waiting for you for 10 minutes.
Ed, is this our entry into the manosphere right here?
Maybe, yeah. Maybe.
That's how we get in.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, that's the intended reading. The intended arc is May needs to be nicer to Cody, respect Cody more, and, and vice versa. But because it's 2/3 of the game before there's really any progress, that means you spend 2/3 of the game with two characters who are being quite annoying to each other. so that would also have been an improvement. Like if they'd improved the pacing, that would have been another side effect. They'd have been less annoying. Yeah, and that makes it a little bit less cute to play with your partner, because if it's two people having a bad relationship, that's slightly less adorable. But anyway, it's still fun. In terms of the story's relationship to gameplay, obviously what it's doing is it's putting your characters into new, interesting situations as a result of them being magically dolls, and forcing them to rely on one another to get through it. And in doing so, they're putting you, the player, and your partner in real life through simulations of these experiences. So in the story, they've got to pull together through these experiences to help them recover a strained relationship. And obviously in real life, you're putting together with your partner to get through the same experience. So there's a sense in which the game feels like it's meant to help you as a player get closer to your partner, if not build a strained relationship, at least like help you sort of, bring you closer together by getting you to rely on each other, which was quite interesting. Tragically, my relationship with my fiance isn't that strained, so the game wasn't able to simulate that part of it. But it does provide a fun but it does provide a fun activity for you to do together, bond together, and stuff. So I think that is a good use of gaming as a medium in that sense. Like it combines the mechanics with the story, seemingly with the intention of creating a specific effect on the players that sort of mirrors the effect that the characters are going through.
Mm-hmm.
So I really appreciate that. And we've talked before about how I enjoy when games take advantage of the fact that they are games to give you something else that you couldn't just get from a different medium. And that's why I was a bit confused when I read that apparently they're making a film with this game.
Oh, really?
I don't really know how that would work. I don't really get the appeal of that. I mean, that's possibly true of lots of video game movies, but then again, lots of video game movies aren't that well received. So maybe.
I mean, I guess, the basic concept of couple get turned into small versions and have to fight through a Honey, I Shrunk the Kids style adventure while learning that they actually love each other or whatever. If that is the ending, I don't know. I guess, it's a straightforward thing, and it has, and these games have sold like incredibly well. It Takes Two sold like 20 million copies or something.
Yeah, and it won Game of the Year, Game Awards the year it came out. Very well received.
So it's got name recognition, I guess.
Yeah, but it feels like it's sort of missing the core thing that I found quite appealing about it. And I mean, it got me thinking a bit about what cooperative games could do. Like, I do feel like there's not that many games in my experience that are really fun to play split screen, because the core of this experience is you're in a series of situations where the mechanics mean you need to both contribute to a specific task to be successful, whether that's you both need to pull a lever, or like I said earlier, one of you needs to freeze an enemy or reveal a weak spot and the other one needs to hit it. So what the game had me thinking about was the potential for like different versions of that, different types of co-op mechanics in games, and what other kind of relationship effects that could have. Like that would be to me, that sounds like a really interesting thing to explore. I think this has done a really good job of exploring this specific thing of making you rely on each other mechanically like that. But it made me think, what other effects could a different set of mechanics have on a relationship beyond just mechanically requiring each other to advance the next section? What if the cooperation was more expressive or complicated, for example? Like perhaps having a game, I'm not sure what mechanics could look like that would let you build in each other's creativity in a way. I guess like that's part of the appeal of like Minecraft when played cooperatively, for example. You're sort of combining a creative experience. But again, it makes me think that this is like an area of gaming that I think I would really like to see more people work on. I mean, I'm not a game designer. I've not got good brain, but I would like to see other people sort of delve into that. It feels like there's potential there. Yeah.
Well, I'm just saying, it's surprising that there haven't been more games like this, to be honest. When I remember when they showed this off, and they made a game called A Way Out before this, which was basically the same concept, but it's two guys escaping prison. And I was just like, it seems weird that it seems like such a straightforward thing. I think the kind of commercial fact that you need a second person to play this game.
Yeah.
And I know these games, they essentially give you a second code that you can give to someone else. So you only need to buy one copy for two people, because you can play them online as well. Than locally. Maybe that's it. I remember there was a game at the Game Awards. I forget what it was, but it was very obviously inspired by It Takes Two. So I guess some other people are picking it up. But
and I guess the sort of related thing that people like us fucking dweebs would think about would be like, is there a kind of co-op game of this vibe that could have like politically useful effects, or could be politically interesting, or help develop political relationships in some way? I mean, obviously you could, without changing the mechanics, you could reskin it and make it about, I don't know, two comrades building towards a revolution. But in terms of like changing the mechanics, like it would be really interesting to think more about how that would look inside of a video game. Like maybe you could have a game where you start off like more siloed and like weaker, and then like as the game goes on, your cooperation needs to increase for progress to be made, and ultimately you come together in like as the game continues, something like that. I feel like there's a lot of tabletop games which play around with that kind of thing a bit more. Like they kind of got me thinking about like the sort of Red Plenty games, studio or developers who make tabletop games. But it'd be really interesting to think about, what kind of cooperative games could be made in this kind of vein. But yeah, so that was really my feeling on it. It's a very varied, very accessible game, good at helping you bond with the person you're playing with. As we said earlier, sold very well, reviewed very well, won a bunch of awards. As someone who already plays games, like I said, it does have its limitations. Bit too easy, kind of a whistle-stop tour of a bunch of mechanics I've played elsewhere. But like it's primarily trying to get you to have a certain kind of social experience, and it's very good at doing that. Yeah, and it got me excited about the potential for other kind of cooperative gaming experiences. So yeah, if you've got someone you want to introduce into gaming, this is a great game to do that. And that's my take on It Takes Two.
So what percentage, as we've established, you just got engaged, what percentage of your relationship success would you ascribe to It Takes Two, the video game?
95% probably.
95%?
Yeah, really high.
You're going to invite Joseph Faris, the game director, to your wedding?
He's officiating the wedding,
Of course.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Sofie?
I don't have a very sophisticated thought. I love Little Creature in Big World. I love that as a genre. It's like one of my favorite genres.
Have you seen Honey, I Shrunk the Kids?
I think I must have. But like, I think the reason I like it so much is because of Ants, the original Ants movie, which is an allegory for unionizing. I will not be taking any questions about that.
It's unfortunate it has Woody Allen and Sylvester Stallone in it.
Yeah, I mean, but I'm so fond of that movie, and anytime I see anything sort of like, small creature, big world, just reminds me of Ants. Really fun. I don't know why I have such a fondness for it. I think I also played the like PlayStation 1 ants video game, and I was just so entertained by the idea.
Are you sure
like,
you're not getting
I'm a
mixed up
tiny
with...
ant, and there's a big leaf.
Are you sure you're not
I love
getting?
it.
Are you sure you're not getting mixed up with A Bug's Life?
I think I do confuse them all the time.
Yes, because they're both like about a little guy.
I think I'm thinking of ants though, is when they unionize against the grasshoppers because the grasshoppers make them...
that's grasshoppers are in
That's
Bug's
ants.
Life. It's a
I'm
Bug's
pretty
Life.
sure it's... Is it? Oh, is it A Bug's Life?
There is like a thing online about how ants is a metaphor for
Yeah, it's
unionization.
like, they all join forces against the big grasshoppers, and they're like, "There's more
Oh,
of
no,
us."
I am thinking of Bug's Life. Yeah,
I take it
sorry.
back. That is the superior film as
Yeah,
well.
it is the better film. Yeah, so sorry.
That one
yeah,
has
Bug's Life, which
Kevin
I do...
Spacey in it, so there's no winning.
Yeah, understandably, I do confuse the two because they are 100% intended to be confused. So I don't feel bad about that confusion. But yeah,
no, it's
I don't
totally
know.
fine.
Weird era, wasn't
Yeah, it was
When
just...
someone would make a film and then someone else would just make sort of the same kind of Finding Nemo and
still do
Shark Tale.
that.
No, there's
still do that.
there's a specific reason why that happened with Ants and
still
Bug's
do
Life,
that.
but
There's
it's
like a whole...
beyond the remit of this hopefully shorter podcast to get into.
But there's like a whole genre of YouTube videos where they basically compare like the fake ones that are clearly intended to be mixed up for the original titles. Things it seems to be happening all the time. Anyway, that's my not very sophisticated. I just really like that as a genre. I love to see it in games.
fun,
I think
it's
it's a
fun.
really exciting and interesting way to, especially in puzzles, because it's like, how do we use tools or use things that we're very familiar with, but in a different way because it's like twice the size or, much more unwieldy than we're used to. I just really like that idea. I
Have
think it's
you
great.
played Grounded?
I've played a little bit, but I kind of played it when I was a bit worn out by survival games, so I didn't really get into it.
That, for our listeners, that you play as kids who are... It's basically Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, that you get shrunk down into a American suburban garden and you have to fight ants and stuff like that. And that's also made by Obsidian, so that we've got at least another episode where we talk about Obsidian games.
I guess they like very literally give you a new perspective on the normal. Like, I guess that to me is like the appeal of that kind of thing. It makes me like look at the room around me in like a new excited lens of, oh, that stack of folders up there that we've got could, imagine me clambering up that if I were a tiny little guy. But anyway, that's the It Takes Two discourse, the official Red Barrels line. Woo! And Sophie, have you been playing any games of late?
Why, yes.
Wow,
I
segue.
have.
Love it. That's true radio.
I'm going to jump straight into mine, which is... So my game, I'm going to be talking about Monster Hunter Wilds. I was not initially super excited to talk about this because I haven't actually played a lot of this game. I've basically just gotten through the main story. But then I had a think about it, and similar to my American Truck Simulator conversation, I was like, I have an angle, it turns out. Turns out I have an angle. So, for those of you who don't know, Monster Hunter Wilds, the game, I guess, came out this year, 2025. Not to be confused with Monster Hunter Worlds or Monster Hunter Rise, which are two titles which came out in about the last 5 years or something. So they come out pretty regularly.
I think it's a little bit longer than that, but yeah,
A little bit longer,
pretty
yeah.
regular.
So, yeah, basically, the game starts with your group of explorers surveying the wasteland and discovering the injured and unconscious body of Nata, which is a native boy from the Forbidden Lands, which was thought to have been previously unoccupied by the Guild, the Hunters Guild, the central governing association of the world. It seems, don't worry, we'll get back to that. So Nata claims that he and his people were attacked by a white wraith, which is a monster that was previously thought to be extinct. We are then tasked, along with our scrappy crew, to escort Nata back home and investigate this white wraith appearance. We later rescue yet another native child, Nona, who implores us to rescue her native brother, Isai, who is being attacked by the very first monster in the game that you are tasked with fighting and killing. We are then taken to Isai's village and fed as thanks. Very sort of pornographic film of the food.
Oh yeah, the food in the
which
Monster Hunter is
is
incredible.
it is famous for. So it does make you a bit hungry. And we're also sort of provided more information as to how we might begin our search for the Keepers, which is Nata's people, this original native boy that we discovered, get him back to his people. So the main story of the game takes about 13 to 20 hours to beat, according to a website I looked it up on. With the help of my friends. True experts. With the help of my friends, it took me about 23 hours, according to Steam.
Oh.
I will be transparent and admit that Monster Hunter Wilds is not the sort of game I would usually play if it weren't for external pressure from friends and a bit of FOMO. I do think the fact that all of my friends were telling me to just get through the main story until the games open up is a bit silly. I think it's a little bit ridiculous to have
That
to
is
pay...
something I've heard. It's not just your friends. yeah.
Exactly. No, I think it's a little bit ridiculous to have to pay 60 quid for a game whose main quest line we merely tolerate. After said main quest line, however, the game does seem to explode wide open in a way that is really not very gracefully handled. All of a sudden, you learn that the weapons and armor you've been painstakingly creating all along are actually just pathetic, silly baby armor
Rubbish,
and
they're rubbish.
baby weapons. And now you get to the real stuff.
Ooh.
So...
This sounds like every MMO.
It is
yes,
very
it
MMO.
is very MMO coded. It is extremely MMO coded. So, whereas previously an armor set might have required you to fight a monster a couple of times over to get all of the requisite drops, you'll now need to fight a monster any number of times to collect several drops of an incredibly rare harvest ability that has a drop rate of like 2%. And nothing quite describes the disappointment of hearing that your friends have collected several monster claws every single round while you have still collected none. So as someone who's not a huge grinder in video games, this was really quite a bit disappointing for me. Still, the mechanics of the game are satisfying. It is fun to play. Once you get past this sort of ridiculously individualized style of combat for each weapon, and now in Monster Hunter Wilds, you can carry not one but two weapons to earn a doctorate in.
And there's something like a dozen different weapons to choose from, or styles of weapons to choose from or something.
That is my point. Yes, exactly. So there's
Ridiculously.
like 12 different weapons, and they all have their own different play styles and combos, and basically, so now there's two weapons that you can sort of get a doctorate of weaponry in. You can learn to pull off combos and attacks that are genuinely visually stunning. It's clear how much time and effort the animators put into the attacks that are somewhat hidden behind flashy post-processing effects and damage numbers. The monsters are beautiful, also very well animated, extremely cool at times. They feel very weighty and really have a sense of scale and presence in the world that they inhabit, which is nice. That being said, while there are certainly satisfying moments in the hunts, I do feel like most of the time I tend to enter a sort of trance of doing hit after hit after hit, following the monster when it moves off to a new location, and then doing hit after hit after hit, and sort of rinsing and repeating until it dies fairly pathetically to the sound of victorious music. It's definitely more of a hangout with my friends and actually catch up about our day, because nothing that's happening on screen is too distracting to not do that, which I definitely appreciate, but perhaps not for 60 quid.
Yeah.
So it is for sure a game I would recommend playing with friends, which leads me to my next point. Playing with your friends requires you to use the interface, which is absolutely awful. It's so dog shit. I don't know if it's just because it's a sort of mistranslation between like the Japanese menu or the English menu, but the menus are organized in such a way that doesn't seem to translate for most Western gamers.
Wow.
And it takes a few tries of just tabbing in and out of different sets of menus, or just looking up how to do something on the wiki to find out how to achieve certain fairly simple objectives.
Can you invert the camera though?
Yes, I think you can. I don't know
That's
how many
something-
times.
That's something Ubisoft.
I don't know how many controls you can invert, but I think there is one. So playing with friends is immeasurably more difficult than it should be and requires you to invite your friends to a link party before you do anything else. This only allows you to send notifications to your friends when you begin a hunt. However, fully cooperative play is not a thing. This means that your friends just sort of have to put their own gameplay on hold while they wait for push notifications to join you on hunts to assist in the fight, and then they simply disappear from your game world when you're finished. So it's an extremely convoluted system for a multiplayer experience that leaves a lot to be desired, to be honest. But anyway, let's get into the meat of the monster, the politics. So my affectionate nickname for this game has been Poaching Simulator.
Oh yeah.
Until fans of the franchise and my friends corrected me to say that the world actually dictates how many of a particular monster species you could kill, or you're allowed to kill, and so it would be perhaps more accurately described as Culling Simulator. I will give it that. So you play as a hunter who reports to the Hunters Guild, capital H, capital G, which is the central body that is tasked with maintaining the ecosystem and preventing certain species from becoming extinct. They record the populations of monsters in certain areas, and hunters are only allowed to hunt so many of a particular species, or they can face punishments, the most severe of which is death at the hands of the Guild Knight, an overseer of sorts of the hunters. So hunters are tasked with hunts from all over the world, which can range from protecting communities plagued by particular monsters, gathering materials, or capturing monsters for research. But if we're honest, what you'll be doing as a player is finding the best armor set at any given time, identifying the monster species you need to annihilate in order to gather all the requisite drops, and set off with your multiplayer killing squad. So the bureaucracy of the Hunters Guild strikes me as extremely Japanese in nature. That is to say, it is layered with steps that are supposedly there to create a sense of accountability, but ultimately serves a way to just justify the power of the organization. There's something extremely funny to me about playing a character that can take down a creature 10 times my size, but needing to be officially authorized to do so by my biology nerd handler, Alma. There's also a distinct whiff of colonialism about the Hunters Guild.
Oh, yes.
So the world implies that without the guild, the environment would just sort of spiral out of control, the implication there also being without humans. You come across multiple native peoples in the course of the main storyline who simultaneously have spent multiple generations living alongside particular monsters and yet having absolutely no idea how to deal with them. Fear not, the Monsters Guild is here to swoop in. Teach the natives how to effectively kill and harvest the monsters they've been peacefully living alongside and save the day. The incorporation of fictitious natives into the plotline strikes me as a little weird and insincere, given Japan's own track record with colonialism for their own native peoples, the Ainu. For those of you who don't know, I lived in Japan for 2 years.
Oh, really? I didn't hear that.
Yeah, I lived in Japan for 2 years. Specifically, I lived in Hokkaido, which is the historical homeland of the Ainu native population. And honestly, if I'd not lived in in Hokkaido specifically, I probably wouldn't have known anything about the Ainu. The Japanese talk about them extremely little and vaguely. And it definitely feels like there's this implication that the Ainu didn't disappear, but just became the Japanese people that we know today. The Ainu was subject to forced assimilation, which included forcing the Ainu off of their land, which resulted in them having to give up their subsistence ways of life, and were placed in Japanese language schools where speaking the Ainu language was forbidden. The most recent survey of Ainu living conditions in Hokkaido places the current population at least 19,786 people. The Ainu language is critically endangered, and according to the Endangered Languages Project, there are only 2 native speakers left worldwide.
Wow.
So, colonizers are terrible for the people and the lands that they occupy, obviously. They're also terrible for the natural environment. There's definitely a wider conversation to be had here about the colonial nature of animal consumption, the idea that human beings exist in a hierarchy above animals and have a right to exploit them for resources, just like we have a right to exploit the land and a right to exploit human labor. Perhaps this is on my mind because we recently had the author of The Sexual Politics of Meat, Carol J. Adams, at the shop, but there's a bloody through line.
The shop where you work.
The shop where I work. The shop where I work. There's a bloody through line connecting the harvesting of land and animals to the harvesting of human beings that I'm finding hard to ignore when I think about the politics of this game.
Mm-hmm.
I'm reminded of a podcast I listened to a while back called The Invisible Hand, in which Georgina Savage travels to South Africa to talk to her family about their fights against poachers in the local national parks. However, while she's doing so, she ends up having conversations with the local people surrounding the areas of the park, and they talk to her about how the legacy of colonialism and that has left these areas being developed solely for the purpose of conservation and ecotourism, leaving the surrounding communities with no work except to do with hard farm or construction labor, hospitality, customer service, or wildlife conservation, which heavily favors white hires. The conversations illustrate how some in the surrounding communities have no choice but to enter a career in poaching, because choosing between the life of their own families and the life of a rhino, the answer is pretty clear. Popular history also ignores the very important role that native peoples played in preserving national parks in South Africa in favor of white figures such as Paul Kruger. While I'm not arguing that the politics of Monster Hunter is going to convince anyone to go out and do a colonialism,
It did me a bit.
I do think that the game accepts a worldview to be true at face value, and that worldview is that human control over the natural environment they occupy is good and necessary, that the human need to extract resources from animals is natural and just, and that the people who have learned to live alongside nature in a way that both gives and takes is unsophisticated and unrefined. Overall, I enjoy the game, and will probably continue playing with friends, but it's not the sort of thing that I would play by myself. And a quote from Chinua Achebe scratches the back of my mind, which is, quote, "Until the lions have their own historians, the history of the hunt will always glorify the hunter,"
Ooh.
unquote. And that is my thoughts on Monster Hunter Wilds.
I just want to kind of clarify for our listeners what the kind of gameplay loop of Monster Hunter is. I mean, I played I think it's just one world. So I haven't played the new one, but my understanding is it's the same, which is basically that you go out and you hunt these very large creature, and that takes about like 20 minutes or something. But when I played, there's like a 30-minute timer, and if you take
I
longer
think now
than that,
they're 40 to 50 minutes. I
more-
think
a
is
bit
like the
more-
maximum amount of
a bit
time.
more generous. And then once you defeat the creature, you harvest a bunch of its bits. So it's bones and other stuff, which it randomly drops, basically. And then the way you progress your character, you don't level up per se, but you...
In this one, you do.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
Maybe you did in the original, I can't remember. But the main way you do it is by crafting new armor and gear with those bits. So basically, the entire game revolves around you killing these animals, these creatures, and then progressing further by using their stuff to make stuff you can kill more creatures with. So it's like it all surrounds that kind of economy there.
Yeah.
I will say that regarding colonialism in World, it literally was the premise of Monster Hunter World was that the Hunters Guild is going out and questing to the quote unquote new world. That's what they literally called it. And it was like extremely colonialism coded.
Yeah.
And there was I think you had to probably get further in the story than I ended up doing to see it, but there were some native peoples there. And again, basically, I think after that game, I think they did get some criticism for it. So I suspect that's why there's all that bureaucracy that you were talking about, is essentially to justify, oh, hey, we're not just unthinkingly exploiting this environment. Oh, look, we have regulations saying what we can do.
It also feels very deliberate in the way that they do include the native peoples. Like they all speak whatever language setting you have it on. I do play it in Japanese, so that everyone just speaks Japanese, even though they're these sort of native, different cultural groups and stuff. They dive a little bit into like their native local food and their native local traditions and stuff, but like that's kind of it.
Yeah.
Which I do feel like it is just this very like, don't worry, they're on board with it too.
Yeah.
You know, we're all friends at the end of the day, and we help them save themselves from monsters. And like, there's this one group of native people that you come across where they've been protecting their community by hanging up these sort of chimes which make a sound which is reminiscent of different monster that the monster that was terrorizing the village is scared of. And that struck me as like a really nice way to like be like, oh, this is just how we sort of live alongside the environment in a way that's quite natural. It's evoking sort of the natural world and stuff. And you kind of come in and you're just like, oh, well, that's quaint. And then you just kind of kill the monsters that have been plaguing them.
I from my understanding, at least in World, and I think they've done in Budget, there's always a justification for doing this, that it's like it's like land management. Oh, these monsters are actually unnatural to this region or something. Yeah,
it's literally sort of
and
like...
they have to be culled for the good of the environment.
Yeah, they definitely have this sort of like culling and like alien species narrative where it's like, oh, well, these... But, you know, it's like even the alien species narrative, like even that, like in our own in our world, that usually happens because of humans traveling to and from places, right? That's how you get invasive species. But this world very much treats everything as kind of morally neutral, you know, and they treat this sort of invasive species as something that kind of just happens sometimes. That's so weird. It's like, well, it's probably because of you guys somehow, you know. So yeah, I don't really enjoy that sort of like, I think I almost admire games more that just kind of go with what they want rather than being like, no, but it's okay because we're all friends. That kind of strikes me as really interesting.
I do find it a little odd that, you know, clearly they're responding to, and I've heard people say, even if it's kind of in a...
so they know. They're aware.
People have even said in a joking way, oh, that's a game where you just murder a bunch of big animals, right? But I just think, like, I was just talking about Assassin's Creed, where you just like roll into a camp and you just murder everyone in it. Yeah. And no one complained about that. I've killed so many humans I've killed so many humans in video games.
In Minecraft.
I've done it so many times. I find it, I can't really understand why someone would be upset about me killing an animal, regardless of the actual rights and wrongs of killing animals like that. I mean, we're kind of past that, I would have thought, in a video game.
I don't know.
It seems like he disagrees. He's
back I also have mixed feelings about that.
Yeah. There's loads of things which you can easily depict or do in a game or in media which are objectively worse than lots of other things which are much more sensitive to depict. You know, like sexual harassment, for example, you couldn't include that in like a media for like a 6-year-old. That would be, or like a 10-year-old or whatever. And people would feel more uncomfortable, I feel like, about that kind of stuff than about someone killing other people. And we all agree, really, that like low-level sexual harassment is bad, but it's not as bad as murder.
Yeah.
But it's much more sensitive to include
That's true. That is
stuff.
true. Yeah, there are
for
weird
me,
kind of nuances there.
I think the thing that I think about with this is how close is it to what you might experience in real life? Because none of us ever murder it. Well, because me and Sophie don't ever murder people in real life. It's like not really. It's not teaching you how to behave or normalizing behavior really. Like I know there's the like 1980s moral panic about violence and in video games and stuff, but like not really. Like it hasn't really normalized that kind of behavior.
Yeah.
Whereas stuff which is a bit closer to the stuff you might do in real life does begin to feel a bit more sketchy when you simulate it.
Yeah.
Although I'm not quite sure how that fits into animal abuse. I mean, most people will eat animals and stuff, I guess.
Yeah.
But Sophie, have you got a...
Sorry, I'm not trying to rush you. No, I do think that like when it comes to animal abuse, where it's like I do think that like not all of us are abusing animals. I don't think it's close to us in that way, but I do think that like I'm vegetarian.
Yeah.
And I did recently again attend this talk, The Sexual Politics of Meat. It was very good at the bookshop that I work at. And she kind of talks about like there is this sort of sense of universal guilt that people who eat meat might have when talking to someone who doesn't eat meat, where like in a lot of like right-wing discourse it sort of comes up as like, well, I can do whatever I want and how are you going to get the protein, and kind of being angry at the person for making the arguably sort of more moral decision. And it's like, for me personally, it's like I don't care that much about other people being vegetarian, but I do think there's this sort of issue with especially harvesting from animals. We're aware that we do it, and a lot of us do participate in it by eating meat or wearing animal-made products and using things that are made from animal products, which like I say, like I have a leather jacket and stuff. So I don't know, I feel like it is a bit close to home in a way that's kind of difficult to equate murdering folks.
Yeah, and I guess also like hunting has been a relevant political issue in our lifetimes.
Of course, yeah.
And that there is a sense that there are like some people are very on board with that being absolutely fine, and other people being like, that's not okay. And there's a whole discourse around that. So I guess there is kind of a live political issue with the question of killing animals, which is also, you know, true of various other things like sexual harassment stuff, where there's like debate about it, or not debate, but like certain groups of people are like sort of trying to normalize it, I guess, in a way which there isn't really for murder. So I think that's probably why they might feel more responsive to it. It's more of a live political issue.
I guess
developers.
So, maybe,
that was my sort of gut on it, my instinct.
I just think I should be allowed to kill any dragon I see.
Well, that's
I
the
see
thing.
it,
It's
I
like
kill the dragon.
I do want to add this sort of overarching thing, which is just like I genuinely don't think like playing Monster Hunter makes you a bad person. Like I enjoy it, I enjoy it, and like there's this particularly grim mechanic where you sort of target wounds on the monsters. So where you've done repetitive damage, a wound will generate, and if you can sort of destroy that wound, it does extra damage, and it's very fun, very grim if you think about it, but it's very fun. I think it's just interesting to think about the politics of it. Like, I don't think it necessarily says any moral judgments about the people who made it or the people who play it. It's just like interesting to think about. And I do think it applies to, other games where sort of creatures are the enemy, where it's like, why are we more okay with, I don't know. I just thought it was interesting.
I think maybe it's just a kind of a fundamental human nature thing that, it's one of those things that...
Disagree. I don't really believe in like a sort of like evolutionist biologist perspective of like human nature. I do think it is a colonialist, capitalist, instilled desire to conquer, in terms of like, I don't think we naturally desire to conquer creatures that are out there in the world. I do think it's I think it's a capitalist sort of created implication that there is a hierarchy and animals are below us. And we can exploit animals, and we can exploit the land, and we can exploit other people that we also see as inferior to us, including like black people and women, right? So like I don't think that's natural. I don't think we have a natural desire to exploit things. We've got plenty of indigenous societies out in the world who live alongside nature, don't take more than they need. And the environment stays sustainable with those communities in them. It's when we want to exploit things, usually for profit or for mass production, that's when things go wrong. So I would disagree that it's a sort of inherent human nature trait.
Right. Okay, so that was Monster Hunter Wilds. Got it in the end. But now we're going to move on to the news. And first up, it's going to be me again. And my story is not a very good one. Basically, the core of it is that the makers of, well, specifically the game division of the makers of Pokemon Go, who are called Niantic, has been bought up by another company called Scopely, which doesn't sound terribly interesting, and we probably wouldn't get into it. Except
So that is just genuinely the most boring company name I think I've ever heard. That's awful.
Well, the reason for that, perhaps, well, actually, I think they were also bought in the first place, is that the reason we're talking about it is that Scopely is owned by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Lovely guys. So just in case.
Friends of the pod.
Friends of the pod, yeah, absolutely.
The best guys. Lovely guys. Beautiful guys.
Suffice to say, just if you really need a primer on an entire country, Saudi Arabia are a brutal theocracy who basically also are deeply ensconced in our global political situation because they have
got a little foible.
Because they have all the oil, and for the past few years they've been doing basically a genocide against the people of Yemen. So they're not great, and it's a concern that they are buying up not just Pokemon Go, but also within this transaction they have also bought Pikmin Bloom, which is a similar game, and also relevantly Monster Hunter Now, which is their Monster Hunter version of Pokemon Go, basically.
Game I was just talking about. Adjacently.
Adjacently. I mean...
Adjacently.
I don't think you've given any money to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia.
No, I hope not.
No. Unless you're playing Pokemon Go. Anyone play Pokemon Go? Did anyone Pokemon Go to the polls in 2016?
In 2016, I think, because I was a student teacher at the time.
I played it for about a week in 2016.
I played quite a bit of it.
Oh, wow.
Very cringely. I was a student teacher at the time, and I definitely did use it as like a class topic. We're like, hey, guys, you've been playing Pokemon Go, right?
Wow.
Well, let's talk about English and grammar.
I assume that Hillary Clinton basically ended that. She's the one who ended cringily talking about Pokemon Go when she said Pokemon Go to the polls.
She ruined my lesson plan.
Her greatest crime. But it's not just Scopely. Saudi Arabia, unfortunately, have been buying up all sorts of companies through a company they've set up their own called Savvy Games Group. So they bought Scopely themselves a little while ago. However, just to be clear, they're part of Saudi Arabia's public investment fund, the PIF, which they're using for all sorts of
PIF. Maybe that sounds better.
Sofie took exception to that term.
Can we please come up with better names, guys? What are we doing? If you're going to do capitalism, come up with good names. Come on.
It must sound good in Arabic, no?
Yeah, it's in Arabic, probably. That's really racist what you just said.
If you don't like PIF,
yeah, exactly.
You don't love gaming.
Well, so in 2021, Savvy is a bad name for a game company. There's no denying that. Bought
wow, Alex.
Bought a bunch of shares in Electronic Arts, Take-Two, who make GTA and all that. Activision Blizzard, I'm not sure if they still have those shares or they got all sucked up in the Microsoft buyout. And they also got a 5% stake in Nintendo, though I believe they've lowered their stake in Nintendo a little bit for whatever reason, but they still have some. Somewhat notoriously, they apparently got into an agreement with Embracer Games. If you know them, Embracer were a publisher that they just basically spent the kind of pandemic and post-pandemic period just buying up game companies all over the shop, a whole bunch of them. And then basically it all kind of fell apart. And this was a cause of a whole bunch of layoffs a year or two ago, because it turned out that Embracer were looking to essentially be bought or at least have a heavy investment from Savvy Games, i.e. Saudi Arabia, to the tune of $2 billion. And it fell through at the last minute. So the whole house of cards fell apart. I think Embracer Games, we should do an episode about Embracer because they're just such a weird, there's a whole bunch of weird stuff going on with them. I don't think they actually exist as an entity anymore. Sorry, split off into a bunch of separate companies. But anyway, at the heart of it was this attempted agreement with Saudi Arabia, which fell apart. But this really just shows how incredibly they're going hard in on it. And they were looking to put all this money in, even if it did fall apart. I believe they've pledged, something like $40 billion to invest in the games industry. at some point. And unfortunately, that's not even it, because while that's it for the Savvy games, that's unfortunately not all, because while that's it for Saudi Arabia's national holdings, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, who de facto runs it, Mohammed bin Salman, he also personally owns a 33% stake, basically 1/3, of SNK, the famous game developers who do all the old fighting games and do Metal Slug. They just had a Metal Slug Tactics just came out, I think, a few months ago. So Mohammed bin Salman, as well as being, I mean, practically a dictator in Saudi Arabia, he also is famous for having had a journalist murdered in an embassy. So it's a bad guy. And this all seems to be a general move that Saudi Arabia is making to kind of try and make it big in the kind of tech space. I think it's all kind of linked into their ridiculous plans for NEOM. If you've heard about that, the preposterous city of the future they're building, which includes The Line. It's a single city that's like one.
You guys couldn't see, but I rolled my eyes.
Yeah.
The Line, I guess.
The Line, you could probably listen to 1 million episodes of Trash Future to find out more about that. They love talking about it, and with good reason, because it is preposterous.
Is that what the game Spec Ops The Line is about?
No, it's about Dubai, which is kind of close, but sadly not. It's a good game. Spec Ops The Line, great game. Should talk about it someday. But yeah, so that's what Saudi Arabia's up to. It's not great. But unfortunately, because they've kind of spread their steely tentacles everywhere, it's kind of hard to not buy games that don't fund them, you know?
Do you think it's just a tech thing, or is it a bit like sports washing, which they've also been known to partake in, but with video games?
I mean, I don't know how many video games are going to be particularly critical of the Saudi Arabian regime in the first place. But
you haven't played the newest Mario, evidently.
Oh, clearly, yeah, it's true.
It goes all in.
He's up in arms about it. No,
Super Mario Bros. Wonder (brackets) what the Saudi Arabian government are up to.
You're joking about that, but that's something that could never happen because Saudi Arabia owns around 5% of Nintendo.
It's a bit off topic, but this reminds me, I used to work for Sainsbury's. You've probably heard of them.
Oh, yeah. I think.
Yeah. And this is very off topic, really, but I remember they were doing like Pride Month celebrations.
Oh, yeah.
And I looked up who owned Sainsbury's just out of interest. And one of the biggest investors at that point was the Qatari investment fund. They had, I think, 15% share in Sainsbury's, and it was it's literally illegal to be gay there. And you're apparently really very prideful this month, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I imagine there's some of that. But I think, in general, my understanding is that Saudi Arabia have seen the writing on the wall re-oil, that it's not going to be a long-term moneymaker for them, perhaps, or less of one. So they're trying to diversify into other stuff, is my understanding, which, I mean, in itself is maybe not bad. But, it's being done in service of a really awful regime that does terrible, terrible things, especially to the people of Yemen. So it's not great. But I think that'll be it for that story. But yeah, so next we're going to go on to Ed to hear about the update of everyone's favorite topic.
Yeah, beep, 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 beep. We've got a news bulletin just coming in, hot off the press. Zalmageddon update, as
Zalmageddon
I like to call it. Yes, dear faithful listener, as you will no doubt remember very fondly, we covered the Disco Elysium successor drama on episode 3 of this, your favourite podcast. But much like capitalism, it's a highly dynamic yet destructive situation that has resulted in even more stuff in the intervening 3 episodes. And so here we are, ready for another update. Yes, in fact, there was an update between us recording that episode and it even going to air, which I believe we included in the episode description.
Yes.
Which was that Longdew Games announced a name and a crowdfunder for their game, which is called Hopetown.
I think the crowdfunder is new. It hadn't happened at that point.
I think they announced there was going to be a crowdfunder,
I see.
subsequently the crowdfunder has come online.
Launched,
Yeah. So just very quickly, where are we? There are 5 successors to Disco Elysium, potentially in the works. 1 from the original lead dev's new company, Red Info. 1 from Zaum called X7, which had then been cancelled. In episode 3, we followed 2 of the leads who had been working on X7, Argo Chulik and Dora Klindich, who worked on 3 other spiritual successors in 2024. 1 for Dark Math called Triple X Night Shift, one for Longdew, which we've subsequently found out is going to be called Hopetown, and then one for a company/cooperative that they themselves co-founded called Summer Eternal. Those last three all appear to currently be in production, aside from potentially Summer Eternal, which has been paused due to legal action taken by Longdew, which has blocked Chulik from working for another studio for 6 months. Great, you're all caught up.
I believe that ends in April, so he's only got a couple of weeks.
We're nearly there, yeah. So what's new? Well, okay, let's start with Hopetown because we've already brought it up. So along with announcing the title of their game, they announced a date for the Kickstarter, which has since gone live, as we've just said. And they've also released a trailer which shows a quite Disco Elysium-y art style. They showcase Lenville Brown's narration returning from Disco Elysium, quite a distinctive and iconic part of that game. So it's a bit of a coup for them that they're the ones that have scooped up that part of the Disco Elysium legacy. They've also put out a 10-minute long promotional video highlighting some of their inspirations, Fallout, which you can listen to some of our opinions on that series from, I can't remember which episode, just listen to them all, Witcher 3 and obviously Disco Elysium. And it features interviews with some of their dev team talking about the wider inspirations and concepts like psychogeography, which is a concept I think they've come up with, where the world around you is shaped by your thoughts, which are all going to go into the game apparently. You aren't just looking through the player characters, you aren't just looking through their eyes, but their psyche, their entire mind, says Varia Shanova, one of the writers. You're going to play as a journalist in an alternate universe version of an English mining town. And as a journalist, you have a part in how the story of the game is told within the game. There's going to be game skills in a very similar way to Disco Elysium that shape how you as a player can see, understand, and interact with the world. And what they've said is, quote, "This is not Disco Elysium 2. We're here to push boundaries, not just meet expectations," says Martin Luiga, who was a writer and world builder on Disco Elysium and credited as narrative contributor to Hopetown. So that all seems pretty interesting, and I'm interested to see what comes up with it. It wasn't all good news from Longdew. Earlier this month, PC Gamer put out an article about the owner of Longdew, the South African tech entrepreneur Riaz Muller.
Not another one.
I know. I mean, apparently,
great track record.
Apparently, he's the one leading the charge on the lawsuit against Argo and Dora. I'm going to call them by their first names because I'm sure they wouldn't mind, which is the thing currently preventing them from working on their game at Summer Eternal. Reportedly, and this sounds weird, but let's just go with it, he's been banned from the Disco Elysium subreddit where he'd been promoting Hopetown because allegedly he'd been botting up votes on his own posts and botting down votes on anything negative about him or Longdew.
That's very Elon Musk.
Very, very. Have they ever been seen in the same room? I don't know. When asked about this, he denied it through his PR rep to PC Gamer, but it's kind of hard to believe his version of events as far as I can see. Obviously, the context, as we just said, is he's kind of been the main one apparently pushing this legal injunction, which a lot of fans of Disco Elysium feel it is, to use the legal term, a bit of a dick move.
Yeah.
So that could explain why the botting felt like a good option there. Look, it might not be the worst thing a South African tech entrepreneur has ever done on social media, but it is a bit embarrassing, isn't it? As tradition dictates, we haven't just got news from one Disco Elysium successor.
Of course.
Zaun themselves have announced their next game, but it's not Disco Elysium 2, and nor is it set in the same world as Disco Elysium. They've announced a whole new separate game, which is currently being called Project C4, with the C4 in parentheses, I think, or it could have been square brackets. It's a game about espionage, apparently, inspired by the works of John Le Carré, but also, that's how you pronounce it, but also including psychedelic sci-fi elements inspired by people like Le Guin. They say the game, I'm going to read directly from the PR thing now because that's all we've got to go on. It's, quote, rife with shadowy characters who help move the pieces for competing geopolitical powers in a game of concealed conflict. And that while working for, quote, questionable global power, the player finds themselves locked in a vicious clandestine struggle for truth and influence. So the battle of the mind and not being exposed and all that geopolitical stuff is apparently central to that game, which again gives them a good idea of the tone and one that sounds not unfamiliar to people who've played Disco Elysium.
Sure.
It seems like it's also going to have some Disco Elysium-y gameplay elements too. They've released a teaser trailer recently, which did have quite a strong vibe, but didn't give us that much of substance about the actual game. However, as we are recording this, GDC is happening.
Yes.
And they are rumoured to be giving more information out at GDC. So maybe there'll even be more Zamageddon stuff for 3 episodes' time. But on top of this Project C4, Sam have also announced a mobile adaptation of the original Disco Elysium is coming to Android devices, again with a teaser trailer. It looks like a complete reimagining of the game. You play it vertically on your phone and you've got to select dialogue options in like a visual novel-esque way. They said the goal has been to make it effortless to play in short bursts and that mobile players deserve deep, story-rich experiences. That's a direct quote as well.
They also said they wanted to reach the TikTok generation. Which is a
good sign.
Yeah.
That's exactly what people like from Disco Elysium.
I would say, I mean, apparently, I think some stuff came out actually today that like they apparently... I've heard some people say it actually looks pretty good and it's got the same script and voice acting. It's all there.
Yeah, it looks interesting. There's also been discussions about where this has come from within Zaum and people pushing it, but I don't want to get into too much of that.
That does seem like an odd kind of business. I mean, my understanding is that like a kind of, real kind of like single player dramatic experiences are not particularly successful on phones.
I mean, I will say saying mobile gaming can make alarm bells ring in terms of exploitative like financial models. What they've announced so far is that the first 2 chapters of the game are free and the rest of the game can be bought with a one-off purchase. So as far as we know currently, it's not going to be subscription-based or super full of microtransactions.
Yeah, there were worries because like the initial announcement said there were microtransactions in it, but it seems to be the microtransaction is
basically the game.
The actual game.
Yeah. So that's coming out this summer and pre-registration's just opened for it. Yeah. So that's something to keep an eye on. But what? Hold on. A third Disco Elysium successor has had updates since we last spoke. Can you believe it? Yeah. We've had a second trailer for XXX Night Shift from Darkmath Games. The first trailer, when was that released? The end of 2024. It showed quite a Disco Elysium-esque sequence. Yeah, shocking, I know, where you're hearing the player's thoughts and feelings upon being woken up by an alarm clock, your watch alarm going off. And that's basically it. So you don't get much of a sense of what that game is going to be, other than it was basically going, this game exists, it's going to be a bit Disco Elysium-y.
And also it was going to be sexy.
It's going to be sexy.
It was clearly very sexy.
But this new trailer, it's got a bit more to it. We've got a bit more information about what this game is going to be. This new trailer is described as a pre-order launch trailer. It features visuals that seem to be from Xenia's digital comic, which apparently you get instant access to when you pre-order, with a narration about an upcoming revolution. So again, I'm not sure if you guys have ever played Disco Elysium, but there's a kind of, outside of the trailer, we actually get more information from the description on YouTube of what the trailer says. The first one just said it's going to be a detective RPG. But this new one, and I'll read it to you, says, quote, "Welcome to World's End, Mount Hope, Antarctica, 2086 CE, 35 years after Xenia's revolution. You're a patrol forces operative, and it's entirely up to you how you spend your polar night, solving gruesome murders, breaking sacred hearts, or just killing bloody time in the true RPG the true detective RPG XXX Night Shift." So again, I mean, could it sound more Disco Elysium? We're playing some sort of cop-adjacent character post-revolution. The gameplay seems very Disco Elysium. But yeah. And the only other thing that we've got, I know, not enough updates from Disco Elysium successors, was they've announced that the music for XXX Night Shift is going to be produced by John Cunningham, who is a Grammy-nominated producer who's best known for his work with the late XXX Tentacion, which is an interesting parallel, the XXX. Yeah, exactly. Including executive producing his 2018 album Question Mark, which includes the hit song Sad. He's also worked with artists like Lil Nas X, Miley Cyrus, Halsey, and the late, great Kanye West, who tragically passed away a few years ago, and I refuse to believe anything else.
Did he work with Lil Nas X and was just like, I just need 2 more X's?
And this needs a couple more X's. Yeah, exactly. So that's good. I mean, Disco Elysium's got quite iconic music. So
yeah, sure.
Yeah. And that's where we are. There's no new info from Red Info or from Somewhere Eternal, but there's progress from the other 3 studios. The question of how many of these Disco Elysium successors will actually come out still looms over the whole thing, as does the behind-the-scenes drama. But I kind of feel like maybe the odds of a game coming out have slightly increased from when we last spoke about it. It certainly seems like there actually may be some game being produced, and we've got more of an idea of what to expect from Longdew, Zaum, and Darkmath. So I'll speak to you again in 3 days' time when they've announced 12 more games and 6 more studios. Yeah, that's the update.
There was something that I saw that apparently that Riaz guy from Longdew was claiming that he was one of the co-creators of Disco Elysium on the basis that he owned a company that Zaum had brought in towards the end to help with the programming. And like, he didn't actually work on it. He just owned the company that
Sounds
did that.
watertight.
So therefore,
Hold on.
Has anyone heard of Tommy Tallarico?
Yeah.
oh yeah,
It's giving.
seems like it's got
giving
Tommy
Tallarico
Tallarico vibes.
Studios.
Yeah, definitely.
And there's someone else vaguely I'm reminded of, someone who claims to have founded a tech organization that really they bought their way into using their money from South Africa. I
Something
can't
like-
remember.
Africa,
What was it?
H bomber guy.
That dastardly
This is a call out.
would-be dictator, H. Bomber guy.
Yeah. What are those things that you can stand on and you like stand upright on them and you like can ride around the city on them? Oh, Segway. Anyway, Sophie.
Let's hear from Sophie and hear her bit of news. Let's go.
Yeah, so mine's
Short and sweet.
short and sweet. Basically, just there's a new video game workers union.
Yay!
So the CWA and the Code CWA have formed a video game workers union in North America. Don't know actually where it's based. I tried to find where it's based. I couldn't find it. It might just be my bad research skills, but I just couldn't find where it was based.
I mean, they're like affiliated with CWA, so it's probably like in their building.
That's
I
the
imagine.
thing. Exactly. So yeah, I couldn't find
Wherever
exactly
that
where it was
is.
based. But it was announced at the Game Developers Conference 2025, which was just taking place over the course of this week while we're recording.
Yep.
And I'd just read a section of their mission statement, which basically begins, "We are the workers of the North American video game industry, the artists, writers, designers, QA, community managers, programmers, the freelancer and full-time and beyond. We craft the sights, sounds, and interactions of every AAA and indie darling that has hit storefronts, and the untold many that haven't, building worlds and telling stories and tending to the communities that love the art we create. We are the backs on which the world's largest entertainment medium is built, and are the first to bear the shock each time it stirs," which I think is pretty well written. Very nice little mission statement there. In their mission statement, which I looked through as well, they do make specific mention of addressing the long hours, AI replacement of jobs, low wages, job stability, and obviously job loss, sexual harassment, and discrimination in the industry, which I would say is a pretty good coverage of all the major issues that affect the industry. And according to a tweet from the official @VG Workers Twitter account, this tweet happened about 16 hours ago, they have 250 members.
Wow.
Yeah.
Already.
So there you
That's
go.
great. Yeah, I think, I mean, CWA were already representing game workers in this first place, so I guess they've kind of
I think they made it
spun
more
off and
specific.
into a somewhat separate union. I think they're still affiliated.
Yeah, because I guess the Code CWA is it's like a coders union.
Yeah.
And I think maybe my understanding, which could be not very good, my understanding was that basically they've branched off to make a more specifically about video game workers union, focusing on the industry, the issues that affect the industries. From what I understand, just made it more specific, I guess. Yeah.
Well, it's nice to have some actual good news.
Ain't it just?
I should say that.
Ain't it just?
I should
Ain't
say
it just lovely?
I should say that.
Cut it out. Cut it out.
I should say that relatedly, in closer shores, the IWGB game workers have launched what they're calling the Game Developers On Conference, which is their own kind of a setup, kind of like a left-wing alternative to like talk about organizing and so on in the games industry. That's on April 5th. If you search, if you go to gamesworkers.co.uk/unconference, you can find out about that. If you'd like to attend.
Very nice.
And I think, where is it? I'm not sure. It's in London, I think. Yeah.
London, really?
SE1. It's in SE1. I'm not going to give the full address just in case, but I don't know why I wouldn't, but it's literally here on their public
SE1.
website. I'll tell you, you know what? Caution to the wind. It's in,
Fuck it, I'll do it live.
it's in Jerwood Space, 171 Union Street, SE1 OLN, London.
Union Street.
Yes, comrades.
Union Street. Pretty. And it's completely free to attend. So I think you probably should be a game developer, though I think maybe you don't necessarily have to be, but if you're just interested in joining the sector, go along. Get a free ticket. But I think tickets are limited, so you should probably look into it soon, but it's on April 5th. But that's going to be it, I think. We're all going to be done. We're all done.
Oh, very good, very good.
As always, please share us online and rate us and review us on Spotify and Twitter. You can find us on Spotify and iTunes, I meant. You can find us on Twitter, what remains of it, the burning husk of it at Red Barrels Pod. You can find us on Blue Sky at redbarrelspodcast.bsky.social. And it's not just the podcast generally, it's also me personally. At
Rate him, review him.
at Alex Dean, DUIN on Twitter, at alexdean.bsky.social on Blue Sky even. Should call it Red Sky. Well, maybe we should get on Xiaohongshu and Red Note. Maybe we'll do that later. Not yet, though. And Sophie, what about you? How can
you can find me on Twitch. I stream 4 days a week, twitch.tv/SoFreely.
Well done. And Ed.
You can find me on Twitter at Still Not a Lemon. And you can find me on Blue Sky at Not a Lemon.
I had to think about that.
I did, yeah. Just while I've got the mic, I'd just like to shout out Alex. Thank you so much for doing all the production and the editing on these podcasts so far.
Oh, that's very nice for you.
Me and Sophie appreciate that. I would like to say we've got you a gift, but that would be a lie. But this shout out is your gift. So thanks, Alex. God bless you.
Those words got hollow so quickly.
You need a gift, do you? Mr.
I mean,
Materialist
it would be nice if you're going to bring it up.
Sophie and I will sing your song off pod.
All right.
Not allowed to sing anymore, so.
Speaking of singing, the music you heard at the beginning and soon at the end of this podcast is fantastic, and it's by Brilliant Drink.
Thanks, Brilliant Drink.
Thanks, Brilliant Drink.
Find them on SoundCloud. We're recorded at Mayday Rooms. Lovely people who've put up with us a great deal.
Thanks, Mayday Rooms.
We've
and
put
they
up
are
with them.
wonderful people, and we have full total ideological agreement with them. Just in case there's any doubt, we are 100% aligned. Was there something? Oh, just before we go, it's kind of a weird thing to say because by definition, if you're listening to this, you have a way to listen to this. But if you want another way to listen to this, we are now on SoundCloud and also on Amazon Music. So if you search for Red Barrels Podcast on either, you should find us. So tell your friends. But that is going to be it.
No.
We're going to be done.
No.
We're finishing up. And so we're going to say goodbye.
Bye.
When did we become bye?